workshop, whether it be a painting, sculpture, engraving or bronze, and expected their specifications to be met. The nature of this market meant that Leonardo would have been trained not only in the mixing and application of paint, but also in stonemasonry, carving, casting bronze, and drawing, as well as in the use of mathematics, engineering, and music. As an apprentice working under Verrocchio, some scholars suggest that Leonardo painted the angel in Verrocchio's painting Baptism of Christ, completed circa 1472, as well as the fish on a string and the dog in Verrocchio's painting Tobias and the Angel, created around 1470. But it is suggested by some historians that Verrocchio, perhaps jealous or in awe of his young apprentice's skill as a painter, as well as his understanding of colour, gave up painting and devoted himself to sculpture and goldsmithy instead. Da Vinci's early work as an apprentice was crafted using tempera, a common painting medium during the Renaissance that was actually made using egg yolk, which acted as a binder for powdered pigment and water. And indeed, it was Leonardo's experience with tempera as an apprentice and as an artist in his own right that made it led him to experiment with and be drawn to oil painting. Using oil paints as a medium was a trend that spread to Italy during the Renaissance from the Netherlands, where it had been popularized by artists such as Jan van Eyck. Though it had been used since the 7th century in Afghanistan, this form of oil paint was created using powdered pigments mixed with oils, like linseed, to bring the medium to a smooth paste texture, with artists able to add more painting medium at their will to further change the paint's consistency. This also allowed an artist to produce more nuanced shadows and shading within their work, giving rise to a style which emphasized distance and perspective. After studying under Verrocchio for 6 years, Leonardo ended his training at the age of 20 in 1472, soon after joining the Compagnia di San Luca, or the Company of St. Luke, the Painters Guild of Florence. Throughout the Renaissance, artists could not open their own workshops without being a member of a guild, or an organization of people from a specific profession. Although Leonardo joined the guild upon ending his apprenticeship, he continued to work as an assistant in Verrocchio's workshop for 5 more years until 1477. However, as a member of this organization, he would have been recognized as a qualified independent artist. During this time, as an assistant in Verrocchio's workshop, Leonardo undertook his first solo painting, The Annunciation, dated between 1473 and 1475, a painting which is now held in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. Based on the unevenness of tones and colors, some scholars doubt that this is Leonardo's work. However, others argue that this work is without doubt Leonardo's, but a young Leonardo, before he had begun to truly understand the science behind painting that would bring a preciseness of passion to his later works. In The Annunciation, one can view Leonardo's care and interest in nature, as well as the use of nature to establish the mood of the painting, rather than, like his contemporaries, simply using nature as a background. Around this time, in 1474, Da Vinci also painted the Ginevra da Benci portrait, which is now displayed at the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. This portrait is of 16-year-old Ginevra da Benci, the daughter of a wealthy banker and a practicing poet. And given that Ginevra was married in January 1474 to Luigi Niccolini, it is suspected that this painting may have celebrated her wedding. However, it may have also been commissioned by one of several admirers, including great Florentine leader and art patron Lorenzo de' Medici, Cosimo's grandson. Ginepra's portrait also has a reverse side in which beauty adorns virtue is written in Latin, surrounded by a sprig of juniper to represent her name, as juniper in Romance dialect is Ginevra. The back of the painting is also decorated with laurel and palm leaves, while recent infrared scanning of the painting reveals another motto written in Latin, virtue and honor. which was the motto of the Venetian ambassador to Florence, Bernardo Bembo. Bembo and Ginevra had an admiring platonic friendship, common at the time, and so it has also been mooted that the painting on the reverse side and the front portrait were actually commissioned by Bembo, although this, as well as suspicions of Lorenzo de' Medici's involvement, are unproven. Between 1474 and 1478, Da Vinci painted the Madonna of the Carnation, also known as the Virgin with the Violet Flowers, or the Munich Madonna, as it is housed in the Alter Pinakothek Gallery in Munich, Germany. Although the style of his painting is similar to his other earlier work, The Annunciation, in terms of the method of painting, the plaited hair, and the flowers in her vase, much of the painting remains difficult to decipher and analyze due to damage caused by previous poorly made restoration attempts. For example, the Madonna's head was entirely repainted using too much oil in the paint, leading some scholars to suggest that this was a Flemish technique and that the painting was in fact a Flemish copy. Da Vinci opened his own workshop in Florence in 1477, but although he received his first commission on the 10th of January 1478 to paint a nativity scene for the chapel of San Bernardo, for reasons unknown, but perhaps due to his distractible nature, Da Vinci never completed the assignment, despite being paid in advance, a commission which was later given to Domenico Ghirlandaio, a Florentine painter, but was eventually completed by Filippino Lippi. Whilst running his workshop, Leonardo struggled to find the regular patrons that were necessary to sustain his work. Yet, despite this, in his early years of independent work, he took on an apprentice of his own, named Paolo da Firenze, a man concerning whom not much historical information remains, though we do know from Da Vinci's documents that he was skilled at marquetry, the art of using veneer to create small decorative designs on furniture, and through Leonardo's letters we know that he supposedly kept bad company and was eventually forced to flee the city. In July 1481, Da Vinci was commissioned by Augustinian monks from the San Donato in Spoleto, just outside of Florence, to paint an altarpiece depicting the celebration of the Feast of the Epiphany, which was entitled The Adoration of the Magi. Although, per the terms of his commission, he was due to finish the painting in 30 months, he never completely finished the painting, which today is housed in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, and consists of a mixture of watercolor, oil, and charcoal sketches. It underwent conservation efforts recently from 2012 to 2017, and altarpieces such as this remained one of the most popular orders for artisans in Florence, as both churches and private patrons were interested in commissioning them as a way of expediting their passage to heaven. Interestingly, whilst there is little known about Leonardo's appearance, it has been suggested that the figure on the far right of the Adoration of the Magi was a self-portrait. Other records suggest that he was a striking figure, tall and with blue eyes. Although scholars have no clear idea of his motivation for leaving earlier works uncompleted, by the time he abandoned this project, Da Vinci had accepted a position in the court of Duke Sforza of Milan and moved there in September 1481, though it is not entirely known whether he was commissioned by Sforza to be his court musician or was sent as a diplomatic gift by Lorenzo de' Medici. In the 15th century, Milan had a population of around 80,000 and had just recently, in 1480, undergone a power shift when Ludovico Sforza seized control of Milan by assuming regency over his 10-year-old nephew, Gian Galeazzo. Politically clever, Ludovico forged and maintained alliances with Lorenzo de' Medici of Florence and King Ferdinand I of Naples, both through marriage alliances and through other forms of diplomatic nicety. Ludovico was eager to make Milan into a cultural powerhouse with a status sufficient to rival Florence, and was keen to patronize Leonardo da Vinci as a means of acquiring this status. As the court musician for Duke Sforza, Leonardo used a silver lyre that was shaped like a horse's head, an unusual shape that was most likely intended to attract attention. Historians have also discovered letters, which were most probably unsent letters, addressed to the Duke in Da Vinci's journals, which boasted of the many other skills he could offer the court, including building war machines. Throughout Leonardo's journals, several war inventions were theorized and sketched, such as a giant catapult, a multi-barreled gun, and even flamethrowers, and an early tank. Milan was then at war with Venice, and was an established manufacturer of weaponry. On the basis of these designs, Leonardo would eventually be appointed as an engineer for the Duke. In 1489, Sforza commissioned Da Vinci to create a bronze statue of a horse, which would serve as a monument to Ludovico Sforza's father Francesco. However, due to later wartime bronze shortages, he was unable to complete this work. During these years in Milan, Leonardo also took on another apprentice, who would stay with him for the next 30 years until Da Vinci's death. Giovanni Giacomo de Pietro Caprotti began his apprenticeship at the age of 10 on the 22nd of July 1490 and was soon known as Salai, meaning little devil or imp, due to his propensity for theft and mischief making. Many scholars believe that Salai and Leonardo had a romantic affair during the 30 years they were together, and while, as posited by historian George Chauncey, actions now considered indicative of sexuality would have been interpreted differently at the time, open homosexuality would still have been wholly prohibited by the Church. However, for artists and supporters of the Renaissance, there may have been an interest in homosexuality, given the commonplace relations between master and apprentice in Greek and Roman antiquity. Indeed, upon Leonardo's death, Salai was included in his will, receiving a house and land in Milan, as well as several pieces of artwork. Leonardo also undertook many other projects during this time in Milan, such as developing designs for centrally planned round churches and classical municipal buildings. He worked alongside influential architects such as Donato Bramante, who was heavily influenced by the Renaissance and wished to develop new buildings based on the style of ancient Athens and Rome. No buildings which survive today are obviously based on Leonardo's designs. However, several of his ideas were modeled. Meanwhile, in 1494, French King Charles VIII invaded and attempted to conquer Naples. The following year, Venice, Milan, Rome, and Spain formed an alliance to repel the French, and subsequently, in July 1495, France vacated Naples and the Italian territories, despite winning the Battle of Fornovo, because the battle occurred when the French were already abandoning the territory in response to the massed forces assembled against them. During this time, in 1495, Ludovico Sforza commissioned Da Vinci's famous fresco, The Last Supper. Frescoes, a popular medium in the Renaissance, were murals painted with dry pigment directly onto wet lime plaster. Commissioned to be painted on the dining room wall of the monastery of Santa Maria della Grazia in Milan, The Last Supper took 2 or 3 years painting to complete with the help of many assistants. However, compared to other pieces from the 15th century, this was not a long time for completion. Leonardo experimented with a mixture of oil paint and tempera for this fresco, though the mixture made the artwork more susceptible to the damp conditions at the monastery and contributed to the painting's quick degradation. By the mid-15th century, the artwork was a disaster, and today the Last Supper has been restored many times, with only about 20% of what remains having been actually painted by Leonardo himself. The paint on the Last Supper began to flake off soon after its completion, due to its medium being a mixture of oil, tempera, and gesso, as well as due to the effects of humidity. In 1999, a restoration effort was undertaken by specialist Pinin Brambilla, which took over 20 years and millions of dollars, and included removing 5 layers of paint. The work is notable for several other reasons, including the fact that Leonardo chose to render Judas, the traitor, alongside the other disciples. Jesus holds the center of the frame, and the light on the faces of the others present comes from him, as indicated by Da Vinci's use of shadow. The work, now considered one of Leonardo's greatest achievements, was the cause of some upset at the time, as his patrons were angered by the time it took to complete it, and reportedly, Leonardo lost his temper with a particularly impatient abbot, and threatened to portray him in the place of Judas in the fresco. During his time in the court of Ludovico, Leonardo worked as the official portrait artist to the nobility and their families. Some of his most striking work was undertaken in his role, and he was widely regarded for his ability to render expression and emotion in his pictures. He refined this technique with several studies, including studies in the grotesque and the beautiful, which can be seen in his Madonna paintings. He was also noted for his distinctive style in portraiture, in which he positioned his subjects at a three-quarter view instead of wholly side-on, which gave him the opportunity to capture shadow and depth. One of the most successful portraits he completed was that of Cecilia Gallerani, a mistress of Ludovico, in which he also rendered her dog, a clear indication of his capacity to capture the movements and emotions of both humans and animals in his work. Leonardo also undertook several projects in which he attended and painted dissections, which would have been a highly unusual practice for an artist in his position, although it gave him greater knowledge of the composition of the human body and allowed him to render living subjects with greater accuracy. He also completed several studies in which he analyzed the effects of sunlight on a subject and worked to define shadow in precise detail in sketch form. In 1498, during his time in Milan, working for Ludovico Sforza, Leonardo was appointed Ingegnere Camerale, which translates to Chamber of Commerce Engineer, a position that entailed designing defences and weaponry for Lombardy, a region in Italy, to prepare for a potential French attack. Throughout these turbulent pre-war years, Da Vinci also explored his interest in the intersection between mathematics and art by collaborating with mathematician Luca Pacioli on Divina Proporzione, beginning in 1496. Lucas Pacioli was born in San Sepolcro in 1445, supposedly studying under Renaissance artist and mathematician Piero della Francesca, and prior to being invited by Ludovico Sforza to teach mathematics at his court in Milan, Pacioli worked in several cities and published works such as Somma de Arithmetica, Geometria, Proporzioni et Proporzionali, published in 1494. The first book in Pacioli's Divina Proporzione resulted from a collaboration between Da Vinci and Pacioli, with Leonardo illustrating. It was eventually published as a three-book collection entitled Divina Proporzione, that explored the golden ratio, a guiding principle when sectioning and dividing art, buildings, or other things, to produce the most equal and aesthetically pleasing result. In considering these achievements, it is important to remember that Leonardo was not trained in what was then referred to as natural philosophy, or science. Da Vinci routinely emphasized the role that empirical observation had in his acquisition of knowledge, and argued that the world could not be understood through books alone. On the 5th of October 1499, new French king, Louis XII, a descendant of the first Duke of Milan, invaded Milan with support from Venice, forcing Ludovico Sforza to flee the city, although he was eventually captured a year later while attempting to retake it. Louis had a claim to the city through the Visconti, whom Ludovico had overthrown before assuming power. Following the invasion, Leonardo fled the city with Salai and Pacioli, stopping first at Mantua and staying with the Marchioness Isabella d'Este, of whom he sketched a portrait now housed in the Louvre in Paris. Subsequently, the trio moved on to Venice in March of 1500, before returning to Florence and living in a house together. During his short stay in Venice, Leonardo experienced life under siege. that the Ottoman Empire threatened the city in a war between 1499 and 1503. Turkish warships lay off the coast during his stay, and he offered his services to the city as a military engineer. This led him to develop designs for diving equipment, which he believed could be used by Venetian troops in assaults upon Ottoman vessels, as well as several forms of underwater defense which were designed to scuttle ships before they could reach the harbors, which would have allowed them to land an invasion force. Once again, incredible though these designs were, they lacked practical application and were hence seldom attempted. In April 1500, Leonardo was once again in Florence, though it was no longer the Florence of his youth. The Medici family, who had controlled the city for so many generations, had been ousted following Lorenzo de' Medici's son Piero the Unfortunate's political blunder in 1494, when he met Charles VIII on the battlefield during his invasion of Naples, and ceded multiple fortresses without Florence's golden body the Signor's approval. Although he had faced difficulties securing a patron while setting up his own studio and career in Florence 20 years previously, now, due to the changing political culture in the city, Leonardo was seen as a great master of the heroic style that was in vogue. This respect resulted in him obtaining many commissions and jobs. Indeed, when the artist Filippino heard that Da Vinci might be interested in an altarpiece project that he himself had been commissioned for, the artist withdrew, allowing Da Vinci to take on the project if he so chose. Leonardo lived in the monastery of Santissima Annunziata, where he was commissioned to paint the Virgin and Child with St. Anne, another work which he failed to finish. In 1502, Leonardo was appointed military engineer to Cesare Borgia, who is well known now for working with and being written about by Italian statesman Niccolo Machiavelli. At this time, he was a commander of the Pope's army, who was using the forces in an attempt to seize control of central Italy. Born in 1475, Cesare Borgia was Pope Alexander VI's illegitimate son, and together with the Pope, he sought to establish himself as an Italian prince, and re-establish the papal state's control over central Italy. After a fortuitous marriage to the King of Navarre's sister, Charlotte d'Albret, and following his appointment as Duke of Valentinois by Louis XII, Cesare used his new access to French forces, combined with his father's papal forces, to establish dominance. After Cesare ordered the strangulation of Vitellozzo Vitelli, Leonardo's dear friend, he left his commission and returned to Florence. Meanwhile, in 1503, Cesare Borgia fell from power after his father's death, before being imprisoned in Spain and eventually dying in battle in 1507. During this period, Leonardo completed more of his celebrated work, and indicated a talent for cartography in his rendering of a town plan of Imola, an Italian city, which had never before been mapped in such great detail. He also developed plans to link Florence to the sea via the Arno River, which involved detailed plans with water currents and flow models. While the project was of military interest, it was soon abandoned. Florentine Republic officials, after their victory over the Medici, ordered celebratory frescoes of battles won by the city, the Battle of Anghiari in 1440 and the Battle of Facina in 1364. Michelangelo was commissioned for the latter and Da Vinci was commissioned for the former. The Battle of Anghiari was fought for a single day between Milan and an allied coalition of Florence and the Pope's armies in a small Tuscan town named Anghiari, thus cementing the power of the Republic in this region. Another leading figure in the Renaissance, Michelangelo Lodovico Buonarroti, was born in Caprese, Tuscany in 1475